All right, for this one, we're taking a look at 5-minute code lab 4F, utilizing more if statements. And this project is going to have a couple of problems here, very quick and easy. So our first project is going to be two numbers. You're going to provide the user basic directions of what is expected for them to do. You're going to prompt them to enter two integer numbers, and then we're going to display the numbers that the user has entered, and then display if num1 and num2 are equal, or if num1 is greater than num2, or if num1 is less than num2. We're going to utilize a nested if statement, and then we're going to display the appropriate message depending on what scenario here has played out. So let's take a look at real quick on the nested if statements and how the flowchart looks. So if you recall, we have our first if statement over here, and we have our first condition. If this is true, then this gets executed. Else, right, we're going to do another test here. So we have, this is what they call it, a nested if, because we have our else over here, and then this is indented for a second check. So this is pertaining to here. We go down, if that is true, execute this body of code, if that condition is true. If not, then we have a final else to do another check here, or actually no check because there's no condition here. So this is going to get executed when it gets down to this area. So then it's going to execute this body, which corresponds to this component. All right, so I got the starter code up here. So quick overview on what I have written in the code here. So a lot of you have seen a couple elements that I've done in the code. So I'm utilizing this component here, as you've seen in my other videos, that I set up parameters. So my output of the header information is going to be in a different color. So that information here, again, is being utilized in my header information, which is down below. If you want to utilize something like this for your lab projects, couple things you need to understand so this works correctly, so you're not spending a lot of time trying to troubleshoot this out. So what I have up here is I have a C1, which I'm given this escape code to create a lime green color. So my first statement here is I'm starting out with a C1 in my F string, and I'm doing 25 dashed lines, and then all this text here is going to be in color. I got a series of 25 dash lines, and then I'm utilizing the end over here. This end is referring to this, which is referring to this escape code, which puts the color back to white. If this is not done, or if this is not done correctly, then your code is going to be all this in a different color. So just pay attention to that component there. So I've given you an area over here to type in the code for problem 1. What we're doing is we're prompting the user to enter two numbers, and we're doing some checks to see the values of those numbers and create an appropriate print statement to that. So if we take a look at what the syntax will be. All right, so the first thing we're going to do up here is we're going to create a comment to identify what we're about to do. So we have a print statement, welcome, you prompted to enter two numbers that I will tell you if the numbers are equal, greater than, or less than. Now, if we take a look at that particular sentence, it looks like it's going to run on and it's going to look terrible. So let's actually run the code and see how it actually looks in the output. So yeah, it doesn't look good. So by the looks of it, what we're going to do is we're going to shorten up this so it's on multiple lines, but still use one print statement. So it looks like it'll be a good to put a break over here. This would be on a new line, and then probably numbers are. So after, let's see, prompted two numbers, yeah, maybe a space there and there. All right, so let's take a look to see how we're going to modify the code on this one here. So, and that's simply to do. And what we'll do is we'll do a escape code /n there. So that gives me a new line. And we'll do a /n right there. Let's go ahead and run the code again and see what happens this time. So it looks better. We could have probably did a new line over here, but right now it's fine. So let's go ahead and continue on with the code. So we have our print statement. Next thing we want to do then is prompt the user to input information. So what we're doing here is we're prompting the user to enter num1 and num2, and then we're going to basically display the numbers and how they are related. So we're going to start out with the if statement here. So if num1 is equal to num2, what we'll do then is come over here and do a print statement that the two numbers are equal. Your numbers of num1 and num2 are going to be equal to each other. That's fine. If that is not true, then what we need to do is do another statement here, and we're going to do else. Right, but this else needs to be backtracked over here, so this is aligned. We'll do it enter there, and then we're going to start out with another if statement. So if num1 is greater than num2, then we have a print statement there. If that isn't the case, then we need to backtrack here, because now this needs to be aligned. So we're going to do another else statement. You notice for this particular component, we are not doing any kind of test, because if this failed or wasn't true and this wasn't true, that means our only other option that the num1 must be less than num2, and we're not doing any other kind of test because that's most likely what it is. So there's no reason to put this thing, because we don't need to test the last scenario. So when we go ahead and run this, let's take a look to see how that looks. So let me run this and let's take a look. First number, we'll do 88 and we'll do 10, and 88 is greater than 10. How about that? It ended up working. So let me clear the code and let's run it again and see what happens if I say, now you notice here, pay attention, it says enter your first number, and I'm going to type in cat. Second one, car. Cat is greater than car. Now you're thinking, wait a minute, you're supposed to enter a number. Correct and correct, meaning that it worked the first time when we entered a number, and it also worked with the strings that we entered. Because, again, we haven't gotten to the point where we're going to do some error checking, so we're relying on the user to actually follow the correct prompts and enter the correct information. So if we take a look at this in terms of what we have prompted the user, so if you recall, if we're utilizing the input and we're saving that input into a variable, by default, that is going to be a string. So in this particular case, it did not matter that we end up utilizing a number or a string. Now, to quickly recap and re-identify what we've learned in previous components here, so let me do a quick little check and do print type, right, type for num1, and then we'll print type for num2. If I spell things right, that'd be helpful. Let's go ahead and run the code. So we'll do 99, 11, and you notice that it's outputting that it is a class string. So when you're doing your coding, you're able to put in some things to test out and see what's going on and what you think is happening is actually happening. So let's change this around and wrap this with int, because we're looking for a number, because if we're doing calculations, this will be helpful that we're saving the variable as an integer value right off the bat. So let me go ahead and clear the screen and run the code. So enter my first number, 99, 11. You notice that this is class int now, and 99 is greater than 11, which was the same thing as we got before. We could just get rid of this for a moment, because again, we just did some checking for that. So for problem number 2, we're going to utilize an if-elif-else statement, and that's going to be simple to do because all we're going to do is copying the code and making some slight modifications. So real quick on the if-elif-else condition. So what's going on is we have our first test that's going to correspond to here. If that statement is true, it'll execute here, and then once it's done executing, it'll continue on over here. But if it's false, if that's no longer true, then it goes to our second test, and this is our second test. If that is true, it'll execute this block of code and then exit out and continue on here. So this code would be this portion of it. And then we have another elif for test number 3. So if this is true, then this block of code gets executed and then exits out. So this is the code associated there. And then finally, if none of these is going to play a role, then our final else is going to execute this particular block of code. You notice that I don't have any kind of conditions over here because I still want this block of code to execute. If I wanted some kind of condition to double check and verify that if this code needed to be run or not, then I could put something in there to make it run. But if that's our final and last option, I don't have to do any kind of testing on there. So it'll execute this and then go into the next portion of the code. All right, so what we're going to do then is we're going to take our code that we have here. So from problem 1, we're going to copy this, all this here, and get rid of some spaces. And we're going to go down to problem number 2. Make sure the indentation works because again, we're doing this in a function. So problem number 2, the input is fine. It's just this is how we're going to reconstruct. Very easy. All we're going to do is we're going to take this and go backwards until we have an elif, and this is our new statement. We need to make sure that all this now is going to be aligned correctly. So I just need to do a couple backspaces here. This also needs to be aligned with this. So just a backspace there. And then this also needs to align right there. So now what we did is just improved our code. And you could do a whole bunch of these elif conditions until everything is met, until all your options have gone through. All right, so with that being said, let's go ahead and go back to the terminal window here. Let me clear the screen, run the code. Oh, and yep, I got an error. Alrighty, so line 66, and I have a unexpected colon there. So let's go back to 66 here, and don't need it there. Again, one thing to remember that when we're creating the syntax, your if, we need a colon at the end, elif, colon at the end, else, and we got a colon over here. All right, let me go back over here, clear the screen and run the code. So we'll do 99, 11, so 99 is greater than that. So now we're doing problem number 2, doing an if, elif, else. Same thing, 99, second number there, 99 is greater than 11. Cool. So that worked. So problem number 3, we're looking at a temperature. So we're going to prompt the user to enter a temperature. If the temperature is less than 50, display a message that is cold. If the temperature is between 50 and 80, we're going to write a message that is perfect. And if the temperature is greater than 80, we'll write a message that it is too hot. So let's take a look at our code here. All right, so then for problem number 3, we'll start out with a quick comment up on top. So prompt the user what the temperature is, and we're going to do an input statement. And you notice that what I've done here is I automatically identified this as being an int because I want the temperature to have that variable. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to look at the conditions here of the inputs. So check which message to display. So if temperature basically is less than 50, display that it is cold outside. We'll continue on then. If that is not true, then we'll do a else. And this else actually needs to be back here because this if follows this else. And then we're going to do another if statement. And if temperature is greater than 50 or less than 80, then that is perfect. And then we need to backtrack over here because now this is going to finish off the else statement. Print it is too hot. This if is paired with this else, and then this if is paired with this else. So that's what we call a nested if. And then I'm able to come over here and backtrack and do another print statement. Have a great day. All right, so let's take a look. And you might have seen I'm utilizing something weird over here. So this is kind of a little surprise for you when we run the code and see what it displays. So let's go ahead and run the code here. Enter my first number, 9911. That worked, 9911 for our problem number 2. And then what is the temperature? Let's do the temperature is 44. The temperature is 44. It is cold. Have a great day. When we enter the temperature, number 44 here, so user entered the information, saved it as an integer value utilizing temp. It goes through here. This condition is true, so it printed this out. So as you could probably figure out, we got a little emoji there, and that corresponds to this. Let's go ahead and clear the screen, and then we'll run the code one more time. Let's see, 9911, 9911, or 1, that's fine. Temperature, we'll do 90, and it is hot. Problem number 4 is we're going to update that to utilize a if-elif statement. Same thing applies as we did for the previous one. We are just going to copy all this code here under from problem number 3. We're going to go down to problem number 4. All right, make sure everything is all indented here. And same thing, we're going to take this, backtrack it up here. So that works. We need to backtrack this so it indents, backtrack that, backtrack this. So again, so if this condition is true, then it will print this statement. Else, if this condition is true and it falls in here, because remember, this is utilizing two relational statements, and we have an and. If that condition is true, then print this out. And for this one, again, we don't need to do anything to test out because that is our last condition. And say it's hot, and then this gets printed irregardless what temperature that they had. All right, so that is for this code. So remember the techniques associated here, because one of the labs that you're going to be doing, we're going to have a whole series of different checks here. So you're going to have a couple elif conditions for a up-and-coming lab.